Relying on my morning coffee for that sweet serotonin hit, it's your main man Markee, and welcome back to another episode of r/Am I the A-hole? Now if you love today's content, I want you to sit back, relax, sip a cup of that morning joe, and enjoy today's bloody good content. Thank you. Our first post is by user No Baptism A-hole, titled, Am I the a-hole for telling my wife her parents are not allowed to ever watch our son again? So my wife and I have a 2-year-old son and have been married for 4 years. Our anniversary was a month ago, and we found a nice secluded cabin on Airbnb and rented it out for a long weekend getaway. My wife asked her parents if they would be willing to watch our son, and they agreed as long as we dropped him off at their house. That worked for us since it was on our way anyway. I was raised Lutheran and my wife was raised Catholic, but neither of us currently go to church and have not had our son baptized. My mother-in-law knows this and hates this. She thinks our son needs to be baptized or he will burn in hell. She's that kind of Catholic. So we go on our trip, and when we pick up our son and ask how the weekend went, mother-in-law says everything went fine and that she's saved our son's soul from the devil. I asked her what she meant, and she said she had our son baptized that morning at her church. I tried my best to keep my cool, so I didn't scream at mother-in-law in front of my son, but I pretty much grabbed my son and left. On the car ride home, I was fuming and told my wife as calmly as I could that this would be the last time her parents have our son unsupervised. She tried to downplay what her mum had done, but I told her we need to wait until we get home to talk about it because I'm not fighting in front of my kid. When we got home and had a chance to talk about it, things got heated. I told my wife that I no longer trusted her parents with our son, and that if they did something like this behind our backs, I can't trust them to respect our wishes as parents in the future. I said this was a huge breach of trust, and I will forever look at her mum differently. She continued to try to defend her mum, saying that she was only doing what she thought was best for her grandson. She even downplayed it by saying that it's just a little water and a few words, and we don't go to church anyway, so what does it matter? I told her that under no circumstances will I allow her parents to watch our son by themselves again. I said that we can still let them see their grandson, but only if we are present. I also said that if she doesn't see what the big deal is with this situation, that maybe we aren't on the same page as parents, and that maybe we need to see a counselor. She started crying and said that this isn't the kind of decision I get to make on my own, and I'm an a-hole for trying to tell her what kind of relationship her parents can have with our son. I told her that I no longer have any trust or respect for her parents, and that I don't know if there's anything they can do to repair that. I told her that I don't care if that makes me an a-hole, but what her parents did was unforgivable in my eyes, and they put themselves in this position to lose privileges with our son. She's been trying to convince me to change my mind for the last month, but I'm not budging. To me, this is a hill I'm willing to die on. So, you wouldn't be the a-hole for telling your wife her parents aren't allowed to watch your son again. In my eyes, this paints a perfect picture of what the hell they're up to. And if they're allowed to get away with this, who knows what else they'll do that you have told them before you don't want them doing to your kids. How far down are we going to let this slide? They've lost their privileges for now. I guess there are situations if they're willing to, apologize for what they've done and make amends and be genuine about that, but it doesn't sound like they're the type to do that. And if that is the case, then screw them, they don't get to look after the kid again. As you said, they can see the kid, they just can't look after him. That's not such a huge deal. Oh no, we did something the parents didn't want. Why are you mad at us? Not the a-hole OP. In the comments, Critical Aspect says, not the a-hole. These types of baptisms violate church law, and if it actually was done by their priest, you should contact the bishop and file a complaint. Is a secret baptism against the parents' wishes the right thing to do? No. In fact, the church prohibits a secret baptism without the knowledge or approval of the parents. And OP replies, I did not know this. Thank you for this. I will be doing that ASAP. I was going to say something along these lines as well. There were a number of hoops to jump through when my kids were baptized. one of which included going to a class and signing paperwork. It's possible your mother-in-law is lying and that it's not an official baptism. You can't just pop into a Catholic church and demand a same-day baptism. Something seems really off here. And now onto our update. OP says, first off, I want to thank everyone who sent me supportive messages and advice. I never expected my post to get so much attention. Since many of you requested an update, here we go. Turns out some of you were right. My wife was in on it. I confronted her a couple days after I posted and directly asked her if she knew that her parents planned this. She broke down and confessed everything to me. Mother-in-law had been pestering her about baptizing our son non-stop, and my wife finally caved. My wife has been working from home during the pandemic, while my job requires me to go into the office. My wife and mother-in-law started doing Zoom meetings with mother-in-law's priest to start the baptism process. They lied to the priest and told him that I was okay with baptizing our son, but didn't want to be involved. The priest allowed it, and they started doing online baptism classes while I was at work. My wife admitted that she planned it around our anniversary getaway, and that mother-in-law had somehow convinced the priest that her and father-in-law would be the only ones in attendance. My wife told me that I wasn't supposed to find out, but mother-in-law couldn't keep her mouth shut for even one day about it. Their intention was to keep this from me permanently. I did contact the church to let them know the truth. I talked with the priest, and he was surprisingly helpful. He said that he would take the proper steps to make sure mother-in-law is no longer welcome in their church, and to reach out to the local parish to see what further steps need to be taken. I have yet to hear back from them on that. My wife and mother-in-law are mad that I got her kicked out of her church, but I don't care what they think or feel anymore. These people who I love and trust have betrayed me, and I felt a range of emotions that I didn't know existed. My wife begged for forgiveness, but the fact that she didn't come clean on her own makes me feel that she would have kept this from me unless I confronted her. She is willing to do therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. I don't know if I want to put in that work. I feel like there is no coming back from this. I contacted a divorce lawyer and started discussing what a divorce would look like and if there is any way that I can add provisions to a divorce agreement that would keep my in-laws from seeing my son unsupervised. He's been very helpful, but I have not given him the go-ahead to actually file for divorce yet. I feel I'm still too angry about the entire thing to think rationally, and want to give myself time to fully grasp what a divorce will mean for me and for my family. My wife and I aren't talking much. I pretty much go to work, come home to play with my son, go to bed, and repeat. I don't know what the future is going to bring, but I do know that without the support and help from people here, I don't think that I would have had the clarity I do now. And in the comments, MM172 says, I'm sorry you're going through all this, and I'm particularly sorry to the one person that you should be able to trust in this mess is on the wrong side. If you don't feel like therapy with her would be productive right now, maybe consider going on your own to see if you can sort through the anger enough to figure out the path ahead. I think this is extremely telling though. Quote, my wife and mother-in-law are mad that I got her kicked out of the church. End quote. You did not get mother-in-law kicked out. The priest, aka the person with more incentive to be concerned about your child's spiritual well-being than your feelings than anyone else in this situation, looked at the matter objectively and went, this is not what God wants, and our community doesn't want it either. The fact that this hasn't prompted a similar, wow, we really were out of line, weren't we, realization from your wife is not encouraging, to say the least. Lion Charter 93 replies, I'm floored by the fact that mother-in-law lied to the priest. As a Catholic myself, the thought would never even cross my mind. Mother-in-law thinks she's so holier than thou, but thinks it's okay to lie like that? In my opinion, she's not a Catholic. She's a bigot. Both the wife and the mother-in-law lied to the priest. The wife was involved just as much as her mother. In my honest opinion, that makes her an even bigger a-hole than her mother. The wife is an a-hole for lying to her husband, but she isn't religious, so there is no reason she should be caring about lying to a priest. She said what she needed to get him to splash their magic water on her baby so her mother would pee off and leave her alone. What she did to OP was really wrong, but I do feel kind of sorry for her because it sounds like she was getting harassed constantly and was probably pretty desperate. I can see how from her point of view, it's just some water and words. It doesn't hurt anything, it doesn't change anything, and it would make the bullying stop. I'd probably have tried to convince my husband to just go along with it to keep the peace, but going behind his back was crappy. And Shira Greywolf replies to an earlier comment and says, this, she's such a God-fearing woman that she lied to her own priest? I can't even compute that sentence. She probably excused it in her own mind and said, well, it's for my grandbaby's soul. Which, in her daughter's own words, is just a little water and a few words anyway. Who cares if those words are actually truthful or not? Sarcastic, by the way. Discombobulated Slug says, your mother-in-law still has control over your wife, and maybe your wife's eagerness to please her mother outweighs her loyalties to you? This, my mother-in-law started planning on doing the same to our son, who was baptized but just not in her church/religion. My husband and I said nope. My mother-in-law never babysat my kid anyway, so she never had access to him without us being there. But my husband standing up was crucial. The fact that his wife chooses her mother over her husband is the real issue here. Well, at least one of the real issues. It's great to see spouses as a strong unit. Back in the 50s, when my grandparents had their first kid, my granddad's parents tried to push them to baptize their daughter Catholic, even though they'd agreed to raise the kids Orthodox, so my grandmother wouldn't be executed. Excommunicated. And luckily, my grandfather basically told them to stop pushing it or F off. And Delays said, glad you haven't given the divorce papers yet, and you have a lawyer advising you. Do not make any decisions when you are angry. Take time to see if this is what you really want. Delay decisions born of anger and hasten those born of compassion. Mostly yes, a few exceptions here and there like due diligence, to ensure that your compassionate decisions aren't from being lied to, etc. But for the most part, absolutely. And Random Act of Random says, as someone who went through a divorce, I can confidently say to not make any decisions while angry. Give yourself as much time as needed to process and only make decisions then. Personally, cutting mother-in-law out of your lives would be number one of my list to forgiveness, and it's almost to a certain guarantee that your wife only did it to appease dearest mother. That doesn't take away her fault in this, but there was external pressure. Anyways, good luck to you and hope that it works out for the best, whatever that ends up being. Yeah, that really is quite a hasty divorce, statement right there, but I guess I can see where the thought process comes in there, and if she's not going to be on his side, then she's against him. Though this may not be a situation particularly calling for it. I mean, the way to fix this is just to say, hey, they're not going to see the kids anymore. You're my spouse, you agree to that, right? I'm not completely sure on that one. I feel like there's a lot of good insight in these comments here, and I agree with them. What do you guys think about this situation? Is he being too hasty to the divorce papers? Seems a bit weird to me. Our next post is by user He's the Father, titled, Am I the a-hole for not agreeing to a paternity test unless my husband goes to therapy? So I, 28 female, and my husband, 32 male, have a 3-year-old son together. There has never been any doubt that my husband is the father. I've never given him any cause for concern that I cheated on him, and he acknowledges all of this. Last week, he came to me and said that for the last few months, he has been plagued, his word, with this anxiety that our son is not his. They don't look identical, granted, but they definitely share similar features, and I see my husband whenever I look at my son. I was obviously blindsided by this. I had no idea he was having these thoughts. I asked him to explain why he thought he wasn't his, and he couldn't really provide any answer other than a gut feeling. He asked me if I would be okay if he got a paternity test done so it would ease his mind. I initially said absolutely not, no way in hell. I was very offended. He told me that he could just do it without my permission, and I said if he did that, I would never forgive him. My husband does not have a history of anxiety, but he did lose his job back at the start of the pandemic, so he's been with our son most of the time while I work my full-time job from home. I know this hasn't been easy on him. I'm not a psychiatrist or anything, but maybe he is starting to resent our son or something from just having to be around him constantly. After our heated first conversation, I spoke with some friends about it, and they said that he was probably having psychiatric problems due to the stress of not having a job. I came back to my husband and said that if he went to therapy and maybe started taking some anti-anxiety meds, that I would consider getting the test. He was very upset at this and said that once he got the results of the test back, he wouldn't be anxious anymore, and that I wasn't being fair by making him go through a whole rigmarole, again his word, just to get the peace of mind, which was a phrase he used a lot during this. He again threatened to just get the test without my permission, and I said this would effectively end our relationship. I think there's something more serious going on here, and I thought that my solution here is as fair as I'm willing to be. My friends are divided. Some think I should just take the test, and others are saying that he's being insane, and that if I cave to this, there's just going to be something else. I need some neutral perspective here. Am I the a-hole? No, I think this man is a bit detached from reality, and I think he does need some serious help personally. If that's therapy between you two, that's good. Perhaps he needs to be medicated though, because this doesn't seem like something that talking is going to fix. Obviously, I'm not particularly qualified to say that, but that's an outside perspective looking in. If people change so rapidly like this and they can't stop fixating on something, that to me kind of seems like a ticking time bomb and not something I want to be subjected to when it explodes. I would be careful, OP. This guy seems like he's a danger to himself in many ways. I'm gonna go with not the a-hole. Edit. I haven't read all the comments here because the amount of responses has been overwhelming. However, I want to say that I really do not appreciate strangers attempting to diagnose my husband over the internet. It is disgustingly presumptuous. Whoops. I'm his wife, and I don't feel qualified to do that, which is exactly why I want him to go to a licensed therapist. Another thing that I'm seeing pop up is that I'm somehow demanding that he take medication. I said maybe medication, meaning that I only think he should be on medication if a licensed therapist prescribes them to him. I don't want to shove pills down his throat, which seems to be what some people think I want to do. As for the numerous suggestions of marriage counseling as opposed to individual therapy, I think this is a great idea. I didn't initially consider it because I was so focused on it being his problem, but we are ultimately a team. And I'll suggest that to him today. Hopefully it goes better. Thanks everyone for your input. And in the comments, this year as a ghost says, not the a-hole. Even in the best case scenario, where this is all due to anxiety brought on by the pandemic, don't believe that after the test he'll get better. Soon it'll be 2 tests, then 3, because he'll be afraid of false positives. This type of anxiety gets worse until it moves on to something else. I've had the same obsessive anxiety for years, and it didn't get better until after therapy and medication. I still struggle. Stand your ground, OP. And edit, I want to be clear. I'm not trying to diagnose anyone. I am speaking from experience how obsessive thinking and anxiety can manifest. I am not anti-test either. I am pro-therapy, both individual and couples, because therapy could provide insight and a diagnosis if it's needed. I was merely trying to get my point across that if it is anxiety, a test would treat the symptoms, but not necessarily cure the anxiety as a whole. Again, if this is anxiety. My wording for best case scenario is simple. Personally, if my husband did this, I would prefer it be anxiety-based and resolved in therapy versus some of the alternatives that people have suggested. That husband is cheating and deflecting, or that he's been obsessing over what he genuinely, rationally thinks is a massive and ongoing betrayal of trust. I can't see the ramifications of him saying, "Oh, I had this invasive thought that our kid isn't my kid," just going away with the test. As another poster said, this is an accusation that holds a lot of weight. It's essentially an accusation that for 3 to 4 years, all through pregnancy and the child's life, that OP has purposefully and maliciously deceived her husband into raising a child that might not be his. This is the exact problem. I have generalized anxiety disorder. The thing about anxiety is that it cares very little about truth or reality or proof. Just knowing intellectually that you are being ridiculous has never stopped an intrusive thought from coming back. If she got the test, OP's husband might feel better for a day or a week or two, but after that, his brain will either go back to the same worry, test results be damned, or find a new one to latch onto. OP, right now your refusal is probably feeding his anxiety. She has something to hide, so I'm not going to recommend that you hold firm to getting him treatment first. But I would hold out until he makes a concrete step towards getting treated, such as making a doctor's appointment. And if he cancels afterwards, because I'm fine now, then draw the line there and definitely refuse the next ridiculous anxiety request, because it will be coming. And yeah, I know I've read this one before, but there's an update and I don't remember if I've read the update, so I'm reading it again for people that haven't read it before. This one also rings true for me. You know intellectually that, you're being insane and that your anxiety is just at work here and it's putting all these intrusive thoughts in your head. I guess the worst case scenario that I faced was on the plane back from Ireland. As the plane was going over India, we just had constant turbulence. Just the plane was just shaking up and down the whole time. And I was on like 25, 30 hours no sleep at that point. And just had all these constant thoughts in my head of like, plane's gonna crash, I'm gonna die, this is it, I'm gonna die, the plane's gonna crash, this is the end of my life here. I know that that's not going to happen. I know it's a possibility, but it's so unlikely that it really wasn't going to happen. And I knew I was being irrational, but, the thoughts just kept coming and you can't stop those thoughts. So I can definitely sympathize with the husband here, that, it's one of those situations that those thoughts can't stop coming at him. And I feel bad. I guess I want to know if you guys think that OP's the a-hole for this still. Anyway, here's the update. OP says, thanks to everyone who commented on my original post. Unfortunately, this is not a great update. If you don't want to read it all, the bottom line is we're heading toward divorce. It took some of the commenters' advice to go to couples therapy, which we did that same week as my first post. I had to push him a bit to get him to agree to the therapy, but I told him it was either this or I would never give in to the test. The first Zoom session was a little awkward since neither of us had ever done therapy before. After listening to both of us, she basically said that she thought we should do the test to see if that eases his anxiety, and that if it doesn't, which at the time was my concern, that we could go from there. So my husband was thrilled, and I agreed, but I wanted to be on Zoom with the therapist when we received the results so we could talk it out with her there, which he was fine with. So we do the test and we did our Zoom session when our results were in. And surprise, surprise, the paternity test says he's 99% likely to be the father. He didn't appear relieved or happy or anything of what I expected. Maybe this was unfair, but I did expect him to cry and maybe apologize to me for his lack of trust. This wasn't just my imagination though, because when the therapist asked him in our first session how he would feel if the test came back saying that he was the father, he said he would feel relieved. But he was angry. He kept saying that it was over and that he didn't want to talk about it. He kept repeating, "It's done," over and over when the therapist would try to ask a question about how he was feeling, and he was obviously not listening when I tried to talk about my feelings. And when I told him I wanted to talk about it, he yelled at me, which he never does, saying, "What else is there to fucking talk about?" I was mortified that he was talking to me this way in front of a therapist, and she said we should schedule a new session once he had time to process. After the session, he wouldn't look at me or speak to me. That he was so upset that he was our wonderful son's father made me absolutely lose my mind. We screamed at each other, and it ended with me saying that I can't do this anymore. He's at his brother's apartment now, finally away from our son, which is obviously what he wanted all along. and my mum is now staying at my place to help me out around the house. I texted him this weekend asking if he wanted to do another therapy session, and he asked if I really thought that would help, and I had to admit that I didn't. The speed at which this whole thing happened, just a month ago I would have said that we had a happy marriage, is still completely shocking to me. But I don't see us recovering from this. This felt cathartic to type out though, so thanks I guess. And in the comments, Phil Kadave says, "I'm sorry it turned out like this. I have a feeling he has some deeper issue, and he was never going to accept any answer other than he's not the father, because he's got it in his head now. I hope he gets the help he needs, and I hope you find peace in your future." Maybe that's it. Maybe he just liked the idea of not being the father, and he just wanted to bail. Or maybe he cheated and wanted her to also cheat so to feel less guilty. I don't know honestly. In any case, he sounds like too much to handle. I thought about this too. Like he's guilty of cheating and needs for her to have totally messed up, lied about paternity so he can feel justified. Sadly for OP, but I think you're right. He had a moment, cheated, and forced this mess on OP. Now he cannot figure out how to get what he wants. I suspect he doesn't even know what he wants now. Spoonbill says, "OP, has your husband seen a doctor recently? A massive shift in personality and mood could be something very serious, like a brain tumor. I know it's a long shot, but having a marriage crumble in a single month is very sad and not normal. I came here to say exactly this. OP, I'm not here to diagnose anything, but I will say that 5 years as a mental health professional has me considerably concerned surrounding this behavior. His response following the paternity test isn't rational, and my hunch is something deeper is going on here. It may be difficult, but I would strongly encourage following this a bit further. Be vigilant. If there's something going on untreated here, it might just decompensate further." And OP says, "He hasn't seen any doctor about this except for the therapist. The possibility that he has a brain tumor seems so unlikely, it's hard to believe. But I will try to get him to see one, even though I doubt he'll listen to me. I'll try and talk with his brother, but we've had a really polite but surface-level relationship, so I don't know if he'll listen to me either." Other medical issues can cause personality changes, not just brain tumors. I really hope you can get him to see a doctor. I also think it's important that someone goes with him, both for support and for another perspective when explaining why he's there. So I think that's where I'm going to wrap today's episode up, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one, and what do you think happened in this one? Do you think he was cheating? Do you think it's a brain tumor or something else of the like that's caused his behavior to change like this? I'd love to know your perspectives down in the comments. Anyway, guys, I've not much to add from here. I hope you guys have a good day, night, sleep, whatever you're up to, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.